So I've been giving some thought to just how much Megadungeons influence the actual rules of the game. And I'm talking here specifically about the first edition AD&D rules. So that's what I want to talk about today on Greyhawk Grognard. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that I'm a big fan of Megadungeons. I wrote the Castle of the Mad Archmage, which was an homage to the original Castle Greyhawk. It was just something that the concept of which we grew up with. But ironically, back in the 70s and 80s, we really didn't have an example of a Megadungeon in the Gygax or Arneson way of thinking of it, which is this massive underground complex with stacked levels and traps and ways to go between the levels and things like that that were hidden and so forth. What we had back in the day were tournament modules, which by their very nature were very limited and small, not these sprawling things that were designed to last for years and years. But that's what the game AD&D was originally designed around. And you can see the footprints of it all throughout the actual rules. So I'm going to go into my handy-dandy player's handbook here. And exhibit number 1 are the special abilities of gnomes and dwarves. So, for example, dwarves can detect sloping passages. They can detect new construction, sliding or shifting walls or rooms, falling blocks and stonework, and can determine their depth underground. Gnomes can do a lot of the same stuff: sloping passages, detect unsafe walls, ceilings, and floors, detect depth, detect direction of travel underground. And that's specific to a Megadungeon environment, because in the Megadungeon, you have it's an exploratory process, and there are traps built into the very structure of the thing. Plus, because it's a Megadungeon, it is constantly being expanded and added to. So the DM might write a new level, and then he sticks it into the Megadungeon, and he makes some connections, and the players actually have a chance to detect that, because the DM wants to steer them into these new levels. So a lot of that stuff is built into the very game itself. There's more. So if you look at some clerical spells, specifically, a lot of the divination spells are specifically written with dungeons in mind. So, for example, you've got Augury, which is the second level clerical spell. And it says, for example, assume that the party is considering the destruction of a weird seal which closes a portal. Augury is used to find if weal or woe will be the ultimate result to the party. You've also got divination, which is actually specifically designed around a dungeon level. It even says the area can be a small woods, large building, or section of a dungeon level. Its location must be known. The spell gives information whether the relative strength of the creatures in the area, whether a rich, moderate, or poor treasure is there, and the relative chances for incurring the wrath of evil or good, supernatural, powerful beings if the area is invaded and attacked. It's designed to say, should we go into that part of the dungeon? Then you've got Find the Path, which will lead you out of traps and mazes in dungeons. You've got this whole section at the back of the player's handbook that talks about mapping. Where you have to map for the dungeon levels. If don't mind if your map is off 10 feet or 20 feet there, here or there. It's got organization, where it talks about you have to have a marching order for a 10-foot corridor or a 20-foot wide corridor, what to do in door openings. It's all focused around the dungeon. This whole section on successful adventures, it's the only example they give is Megadungeons and going from levels to levels to levels and finding a staircase and so forth. It's all focused around the dungeon. Same thing with our friend the DM's Guide, my well-loved DM's Guide. If you take a look at the intelligent swords abilities, we see a lot of the same sort of thing. Detect elevator and shifting rooms, detect sloping passages, detect secret doors. All that stuff only makes sense in a mega dungeon environment where there are in fact secret elevator rooms that you go into a room and all of a sudden you end up on a different level and you don't realize it. Those are all things that are built into the actual DNA of the mega dungeon environment, and they're built into the actual rules. So the rules not only support a mega dungeon, but they're actually designed around the mega dungeon. You don't see nearly this much support for, say, urban adventures. There's the encounter table. You've got some wilderness encounter tables and how to do a kind of a random wilderness thing, and of course there's random dungeon tables in here too. But that mega dungeon experience is really what Gary Gygax was thinking about when he wrote the AD&D rules, because that was really his big example from his game. There were things that didn't happen in Castle Greyhawk, obviously, but that was the chief thing that he was running and how he was playing, and that influenced the way he was thinking when he wrote this stuff. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of neat, because I know mega dungeons are out of style nowadays. Everybody wants adventure, themed adventure sequences, where we have this grand quest to do X, Y, or Z, and then that's the end of the game. But in the original game, AD&D game, it was really, the expectation was that you would have a single mega dungeon with these enormous stacked levels and side levels and elevators that would take you from one to another, and teleporters and ways to get switched around and not know what direction you were going in, and sloping passages that would take you secretly from one level to another without you realizing it. All that stuff is baked into the rules, and if you don't have an environment where those sorts of things can happen, then you're kind of sheeting yourself when it comes to the rules, because there's a lot of stuff in here that that the players won't have access to. They'll have the abilities, but they won't mean anything because they never get a chance to use them. When was the last time you find new construction in an underground? Castle of Mad Archmage is specifically designed around that. It actually has the Greyhawk Construction Company, Greyheim Construction Company, which actually is responsible for creating new side levels and stuff like that, and that was included specifically to use those sorts of abilities. So I would heartily encourage everybody, in your campaign, it doesn't have to be the only part of your campaign, but it's a good idea to have some sort of mega dungeon in there that the players can go to every once in a while when they want to have that big dungeon experience. Back in the day, we used to call that a tentpole. There would be the big Castle Greyhawk in the middle, but there's all kinds of adventures that you could do as well. But the players could always have the opportunity. Oh, tonight we want to go. We want to see what's on level 4 of the dungeon. So I would heartily recommend at least having that as an option for the players, so that every once in a while you can have that good old school feel. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please like the video, please subscribe, hit the bell icon. There's a Patreon linked below. There's the website where there's all kinds of free downloads. There's my online store where you can find a copy of Castle of the Mad Archmage. All the links are below. Thanks very much. Let me know what you think in the comments. Is this the way you've played in the past or today? Do you have a tentpole dungeon in your campaign? Let me know. And thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later.